brother, my sleepy nights. Tonight we curl up by the fire with 12 tales of Christmas. From snow-dusted streets and lonely match girls to generous stars and fairy queens, we'll wander through these old legends. But for now, let's get cozy and drift in to the 12 tales of Christmas. Once, long ago, there lived near the ancient city of Strasbourg on the river Rhine a young and handsome count, whose name was Otto. And as the years flew by, he remained unwed, and never so much as cast a glance at the fair maidens of the country round. For this reason people began to call him Stoneheart. Now, it chanced that Count Otto, on one Christmas Eve, ordered that a great hunt should take place in the forest surrounding the castle. He and his guests and his many retainers rode forth, and the chase became more and more exciting. It led through thickets and over pathless tracts of forest, until at length Count Otto found himself separated from his companions. He rode on by himself until he came to a spring of clear bubbling water, known to the people around as the Fairy Well. Here, Count Otto dismounted. He bent over the spring and began to lave his hands in the sparkling tide. But to his wonder, he found that though the weather was cold and frosty, the water was warm and delightfully caressing. He felt a glow of joy pass through his veins, and so, as he plunged his hands deeper, he fancied that his right hand was grasped by another, soft and small, which gently slipped from his finger the gold ring he always wore, and lo, when he drew out his hand, the gold ring was gone. Full of wonder at this mysterious event, the Count mounted his horse and returned to his castle, resolving in his mind that the very next day he would have the Fairy Well emptied by his servants. He retired to his room, and throwing himself just as he was upon his couch, tried to sleep. But the strangeness of the adventure kept him restless and wakeful. Suddenly, he heard the hoarse baying of the watchhounds in the courtyard, and then the creaking of the drawbridge, as though it were being lowered. Then came to his ear the patter of many small feet on the stone staircase. And next he heard was the sound of light footsteps in the chamber adjoining his own. Count Otto sprang from his couch, and as he did so, there sounded a strain of delicious music, and the door of his chamber was flung open. Hurrying into the next room, he found himself in the midst of numberless fairy beings, clad in gay and sparkling robes. They paid no heed to him, but began to dance and to laugh, to sing, to the sound of mysterious music. In the center of the apartment stood a splendid Christmas tree, the first ever seen in that country. Instead of toys and candles, there hung on its lighted bows diamond stars, pearl necklaces, bracelets of gold ornamented with colored jewels, rubies and sapphires, silken belts embroidered with oriental pearls, daggers mounted in gold and studded with the rarest gems. The whole tree swayed, sparkled, and glittered in the radiance of its many lights. Count Otto stood speechless, gazing at all this wonder, when suddenly the fairies stopped dancing and fell back, to make room for a lady of dazzling beauty who came slowly toward him. She wore on her raven black tresses a golden diadem set with jewels. Her hair flowed down upon a robe of rosy satin and creamy velvet. She stretched out two small white hands towards the Count and addressed him in sweet, alluring tones. "Dear Count Otto," said she, "I come to return your Christmas visit. I am Ernstine, Queen of the Fairies. I bring something you lost in the fairy well." And as she spoke, she drew from her bosom a golden casket set with diamonds and placed it in his hands. He opened it eagerly and found within his lost golden ring. Carried away by the wonder of it all, and overcome by an irresistible impulse, the Count pressed the fairy Ernstine to his heart, while she, holding him by the hand, drew him into the magic mazes of the dance. The mysterious music floated through the room, and the rest of that fairy company circled and whirled around the fairy queen and Count Otto, and then gradually dissolved into a mist of many colors, leaving the Count and his beautiful guest alone. Then the young man, forgetting all his former coldness toward the maidens of the country round about, fell on his knees before the fairy and besought her to become his bride. At last, she consented on the condition that he should never speak the word death in her presence. The next day, the wedding of Count Otto and Ernstine, Queen of the Fairies, was celebrated with great pomp and magnificence, and the two continued to live happily for many years. Now, it happened on a time that the Count and his fairy wife were to hunt in the forest around the castle. horses were saddled and bridled, and standing at the door, the company waited. And the Count paced in the hall in great impatience, but still the Fairy Ernstine tarried along in her chamber. At length she appeared at the door of the hall, and the Count addressed her in anger. "You have kept us waiting so long," he cried, "that you would make a good messenger to send for death." Scarcely had he spoken the forbidden and fatal word, when the fairy, uttering a wild cry, vanished from his sight. In vain Count Otto, overwhelmed with grief and remorse, searched the castle and the very well. No trace could he find of his beautiful lost wife, but the imprint of her delicate hand set in the stone arch above the castle gate. Years passed by, and the fairy did not return. The Count continued to grieve. Every Christmas Eve, he set up a lighted tree in the room where he had first met the fairy, hoping in vain that she would return to him. Time passed and the Count died. The castle fell into ruins, but to this day may be seen above the massive gate, deeply sunken into the stone arch, the impress of a small and delicate hand. And as such, say the good folk of Strasbourg, was the origin of the Christmas tree. It was the night the dear Christ child came to Bethlehem. In a country far away from him, an old woman named Babushka sat in her snug little house by her warm fire. The wind was drifting the snow outside and howling down the chimney, but it only made Babushka's fire burn more brightly. "How glad I am that I may stay indoors," said Babushka, holding her hands out to the bright blaze. But suddenly, she heard a loud rap at her door. She opened it, and her candles shone on 3 old men standing outside in the snow. Their beards were as white as the snow and so long that they reached the ground. Their eyes shone kindly in the light of Babushka's candle, and their arms were full of precious things, boxes of jewels and sweet-smelling oils and ointments. We have traveled far, Babushka," said they, "and we stopped to tell you of the baby prince born this night in Bethlehem. He comes to rule the world and to teach all men to be loving and true. We carry him gifts. Come with us, Babushka." But Babushka looked at the driving snow and then inside at her cozy room and the crackling fire. "It is too late for me to go with you, good sirs," said she. "The weather is too cold." She went inside again, and she shut the door, and the old men journeyed on to Bethlehem without her. But as Babushka sat by her fire rocking, she began to think about this little Christ child, for she loved all little babies. "Tomorrow I will go to find him," she said, tomorrow when it is light, and I will carry him some toys." So when it was morning, Babushka put on her long cloak and took her staff and filled a basket with the pretty things a baby would like: gold balls and wooden toys and strings of silver cobwebs, and she set out to find the Christ child. But oh, Babushka had forgotten to ask the 3 old men the road to Bethlehem, and they had traveled so far through the night that she could not overtake them. Up and down the road she hurried, through woods and fields and towns, saying to whomever she met, "I go to find the Christ child. Where does he lie? I bring him some pretty toys for his sake." But no one could tell her the way to go, and they all said, "Farther on, Babushka, farther on." So she traveled on and on and on for years and years. But she never found the little Christ child. They say that old Babushka is still traveling, looking for him when it comes Christmas Eve and the children are lying fast asleep. Babushka comes softly through the snowy fields and towns, wrapped in her long cloak and carrying her basket on her arm. With her staff, she raps gently at the doors and goes inside and holds her candle close to the little children's faces. "Is he here?" she asks. "Is the little Christ child here?" And then she turns sorrowfully away again, crying, "Farther on then, farther on." But before she leaves, she takes a toy from her basket and lays it beside the pillow as a Christmas gift. "For his sake," she says softly, and then hurries on through the years and forever in search of the little Christ child. A snowman once stood upon a hill, with his face towards the sunset. A very fine snowman he was, as tall as a soldier and much fatter. He had 2 pieces of glass for eyes, and a stone for a nose, and a piece of black wood for a mouth. And in his hand he held a stout, knobbly club. But he had no clothes at all, not even a hat, and the wind on the top of that hill was as bitter as wind could be. "How cold I am! I am cold as ice," said the snowman. "But that red sky looks so warm." So he lifted his feet from the ground and went tramp, tramp, tramping down the slope towards the setting sun. Very soon he overtook a gypsy woman who was wearing a bright red shawl. "Huh? That looks warm. I must have it," thought the snowman. So he went up to the gypsy woman and he said, "Give me that red shawl." "No, indeed, I cannot spare it on this wintry day," answered the gypsy. "I am cold enough as it is." "Cold?" shouted the snowman. "Are you as cold as I am?" I wonder? Are you cold inside as well as outside? Are you made of ice through and through and through? No, I suppose not, mumbled the gypsy, who was getting hot with fright. Then give me your red shawl this very moment, or I shall strike you with my stout knobbly club. And so then, the gypsy woman took off her red shawl, grumbling all the time, and gave it to the snowman. He put it round his shoulders without a word of thanks, and went tramp, tramp, tramping down the hill. And the shivering gypsy followed him. Presently, the snowman overtook a ploughboy who was wearing his grandmother's long red woolen mittens. Ah, they look warm. I must have them, thought the snowman. So he went up to the ploughboy and he said, "Give me those red woolen mittens." "No, indeed," said the ploughboy. They belong to my grandmother, so she lent them to me because my fingers were so cold. "Cold?" shouted the snowman in a very roarish voice. "Are your fingers as cold as mine, I wonder? Are your hands and arms frozen into ice? Through and through and through?" "No, I suppose not," mumbled the ploughboy. "Then give me those red mittens this moment, or I shall strike you with my stout knobbly club." So the ploughboy drew off the warm mittens, grumbling all the time, and the snowman put them on, without a word of thanks. Then he went tramp, tramp, tramping down the hill, and the gypsy and the ploughboy followed him. After a while, he overtook a tame pirate, wearing a pirate's thick red cap with a tassel dangling down his back. "Ah, that looks warm. I must have it," said the snowman. So he went up to the tame pirate, and he said, "Pirate, give me that red tassel cap." "No, indeed," said the pirate. "An ice cold in the head I should get if I did." "Cold in the head?" shouted the snowman. "Is your head as cold as mine, I wonder? Are your brains made of snow, and your bones solid ice? Through and through and through?" "No, I suppose not," muttered the tame pirate. "Then give me that red tassel cap this moment, or I shall set upon you with my stout knobbly club. Now, the pirate felt very sorry that he had turned tame, but he did not like the look of that knobbly stick. So he gave up his red tassel cap. The snowman put it on without a word of thanks. Then he went tramp, tramp, tramping down the hill, with the red tassel bumping up and down. And the gypsy woman and the ploughboy and the tame pirate followed him. At last, he reached the bottom of the hill, where the village schoolhouse stood, and there was the village schoolmaster on the doorstep, looking at the sunset. He was smoking a glowing briar pipe, and on his feet were 2 red velvet slippers. "Oh, those look warm. I must have them," said the snowman. So he went up to the schoolmaster and he said, "Give me those red slippers." "Certainly, if you want them," said the schoolmaster. "Take them by all means. It is far too cold today to be tramping about with bare toes." And he stopped and drew off his slippers, and there he stood in some bright red socks, thick and woolly and knitted by hand. "Oh, those look warm. Give them to me," said the snowman. "Certainly, if you want them," said the schoolmaster. "But you must come inside. I cannot take my socks off here, in the doorway. Come on to the mat." So the snowman stepped inside the doorway and stood upon the mat. "Be sharp with those socks. My feet are cold as solid ice," he grumbled. "Oh, I am sorry to hear that," said the schoolmaster, "but I have a warm red blanket airing over the stove. Come in, sir. Sit on that chair by the fire, sir. Put your cold feet upon this snug red footstool and let me wrap this red blanket around your legs." So the snowman came into the schoolhouse and sat upon a chair by the glowing fire and put his feet upon the red footstool. And the schoolmaster wrapped the red blanket round, round, round his legs. And all this while the gypsy woman and the ploughboy and the tame pirate were peering in through the window. "Are you feeling warmer?" asked the schoolmaster. "No, I am as cold as an iceberg." "Then come closer to the fire." So the schoolmaster pushed the chair closer to the fire, but the snowman gave him not one word of thanks. Are you feeling warmer now? No. I am cold as stone. My feet feel like icy water. Move closer to the fire, said the schoolmaster. And he pushed the chair right against the curb. There. Are you warmer now? No. No, I am colder than ever. I cannot feel my feet at all. I cannot feel my legs at all. I cannot feel my back at all. Then the schoolmaster pushed the chair quite close up against the stove. Are you warmer now? He said. But there was no answer, except a slithery sliding sound and the drip, drip, drip of black snow water. Dear me, whispered the snowman in a gurgling voice. I have dropped my stout, knobbly club. My red slippers are floating into the ash pan. My mittens are swimming in a little river on the floor. My shawl is gone. My red tassel cap is slipping away. My head is going. Splosh, splash, gurgle. That's the end of him, said the schoolmaster, and he went to fetch the mop. Then the gypsy woman and the ploughboy and the tame pirate came in, picked up their things, wrung them out and dried them at the stove, and the schoolmaster put his red slippers on the hearth and hung the red blanket over the back of the chair. Then he picked up the stout, knobbly club and gave the fire a poke. This is the story of how the fir tree became the Christmas tree. At the time when the Christ child was born, all the people, the animals, and the trees and plants were very happy. The child was born to bring peace and happiness to the world. People came daily to see the little one, and they always brought gifts with them. There were 3 trees standing near the crypt, which saw the people, and they wished that they too might give presents to the Christ child. The palm said, I will choose my most beautiful leaf and place it as a fan over the child. And I, said the olive, will sprinkle sweet-smelling oil upon his head. What can I give to the child? Asked the fir tree, who stood near. You, cried the others. You have nothing to offer him. Your needles would prick him, and your tears are sticky. So the poor little fir tree was very unhappy, and it said, Yes, you are right. I have nothing to offer the Christ child. Now, quite near the trees stood the Christmas angel. who had heard all that the trees had said. The angel was sorry for the fir tree, who was so lowly and without envy of the other trees. So, when it was dark and the stars came out, he begged a few of the little stars to come down and rest upon the branches of the fir tree. They did as the Christmas angel asked, and the fir tree shone suddenly with a beautiful light. And at that very moment, the Christ child opened his eyes, for he had been asleep, and as the lovely light fell upon him, he smiled. Every year, people keep the dear Christmas child's birthday by giving gifts to each other. And every year, in remembrance of his first birthday, the Christmas angel places in every house a fir tree also. Covered with starry candles, it shines for the children, as the stars shone for the Christ child. The fir tree was rewarded for its meekness, for to no other tree is it given to shine upon so many happy faces. There was one light in the village on Christmas Eve. It came from Jock Scabra's cottage, and he was the awkwardest old man that had ever lived in our village, or in the island, or in the whole of Orkney. I was feeling very wretched and very ill-natured myself that evening. My Auntie Belle had just been explaining to me after tea that Santa Claus, if he did exist, was a spirit that moved people's hearts to generosity and goodwill, no more or less. Gone was my fat, apple-cheeked, red-coated friend of the past 10 winters. Scattered were the reindeer, broken the sledge that had beaten such a marvellous path through the constellations, and the merry dancers, while all the children of Orkney slept. Those merry, perilous descents down the Lum, Yule Eve by Yule Eve, with the sack of toys and books, games and chocolate boxes, had never really taken place at all. I looked over towards our hearth after my aunt had finished speaking. The magic had left it. It was only a place of peat flames and peat smoke. I can't tell you how angry I was the more I thought about it. How deceitful, how cruel grown-ups were. They had exiled my dear old friend Santa Claus to eternal oblivion. The gifts I would find in my stocking next morning would have issued from Auntie Belle's spirit of generosity. It was not the same thing at all. Most of the year I saw little enough of that spirit of generosity. At Halloween, for example, she had boxed my ears till I saw stars that had never been in the sky for stealing a few apples and nuts out of the cupboard before duking time. If there was a more ill-tempered person than my Auntie Belle in the village, it was, as I said, old Jock Scabra, the fisherman with a silver ring in his ear and a fierce one-eyed tomcat. His house, alone in the village, was lit that night. I saw it from our front door at 11 o'clock. Auntie Belle's piece of common sense had so angered me that I was in a state of rebellion and recklessness. No, I would not sleep. I would not even stay in a house from which Santa had been banished. I felt utterly betrayed and bereaved. When, about 10:30, I heard rending snores coming from Auntie Belle's bedroom, I got out of bed stealthily and put my cold clothes on and unlatched the front door and went outside. The whole house had betrayed me. Wow. I intended to be out of the treacherous place when the magic hour of midnight struck. The road through the village was deep in snow, dark except where, under old Scabra's window, the lamplight had stained it an orange color. The snow shadows were blue under his walls. The stars were like sharp snails. And even though I had wrapped my scarf twice round my neck, I shivered in the bitter night. Where could I go? The light in the old villain's window was entrancing. I fluttered towards it like a moth. How would such a sour old creature be celebrating Christmas Eve? Thinking black thoughts beside his embers, stroking his one-eyed cat. The snow crashed like thin, fragile glass under my feet. I stood at last outside the fisherman's window. I looked in. What I saw was astonishing beyond ghosts or trolls. There was no crotchety old man inside. No one-eyed cat, no ingrained filth and hung cobwebs. The paraffin lamp threw a circle of soft light, and all that was gathered inside that radiance was clean and pristine. The cups and plates on the dresser, the clock and ship in the bottle and tea caddies on the mantelpiece, the framed picture of Queen Victoria on the wall, the blue stones of the floor, the wood and straw of the fireside chair, the patchwork quilt on the bed. A boy I had never seen before was sitting at the table. He might have been about my own age, and his head was a mass of bronze ringlets. On the table in front of him were an apple, an orange, a little sailing ship, crudely cut from wood, with linen sails probably cut from an old t-shirt. The boy, whoever he was, considered those objects with the utmost gravity. Once he put out his finger and touched the hull of the toy ship, as if it was so precious it had to be treated with special delicacy, lest it broke like a soap bubble I couldn't see the boy's face, only his bright hair, his lissom neck, and the gravity and joy that informed all his gestures. These were his meager Christmas presents. Silently, he rejoiced in them. Beyond the circle of lamplight were the other dwellers in the house. There may have been hidden breath in the darkened box bed in the corner. I don't know how long I stood in the bitter night outside. My hands were trembling. I looked down at them. They were blue with cold. Then suddenly, for a second, the boy inside the house turned to face the window. Perhaps he had heard the tiny splinterings of snow under my boots, or my quickened heartbeats. The face that looked at me was Jock Scabra's, but Jock Scabra's from far back at the pure source of his life, 60 winters ago, before the ring was in his ear, before bad temper and perversity had grained black lines and furrows into his face. It was as if a cloth had been taken to a tarnished, web-clogged mirror. The boy turned back, smiling, to his Christmas hoard. I turned and went home. I lifted the latch quietly, not to awaken Auntie Bell, for if she knew what I had been up to that midnight, there would have been little of her spirit of generosity for me. I crept, trembling, into bed. When I woke up on Christmas morning, the spirit of the season had loaded my stocking, and the chair beside the bed with boxes of sweets, a Guinness Book of Records, a digital watch, a game of Space Wars, a cowboy hat, and a 50-pence piece. Auntie Bell stood at my bedroom door smiling. "And a Merry Christmas," she said. Breakfast over, I couldn't wait to get back to the Scabra house. The village was taken over by children with apples, snowballs, laughter as bright as bells. I peered in at the window. All was as it had been. The piratical old man sluiced the last of his breakfast tea down his throat from a cracked saucer. He fell to picking his black and yellow teeth with a kipper bone. His house was like a midden. The one-eyed cat yawned wickedly beside the new flames in the hearth. Snow had been falling since dawn, soft and steady, turning the whole forest white. By evening, the trees looked as if they had been dipped in icing sugar, and the air carried that deep, quiet stillness that only comes in December. On that chilly night, a fox and a wolf walked together along the frozen shoreline, noses low, hoping to find something, anything, left behind by the winter storms. Under a ridge of drifted snow, the wolf spotted a small wooden keg. He scraped away the frost, cracked it open, and both of them stared in wonder. Butter. Real butter. Creamy, rich, thick enough to warm a belly, even in midwinter. "It's a Christmas blessing," said the fox. "We should hide it and share it tomorrow, properly, fairly, like friends." The wolf, ever trusting, agreed at once. They buried the keg beneath a blanket of snow and walked home with the kind of hopeful excitement that only December brings. Before sunrise, while lantern windows still glowed dimly across the forest, the fox slipped out quietly. "I'll just make sure the snow hasn't covered it too deeply," he whispered. But when he reached the keg, he dug it up and scooped out a little taste. Then another, then just one more. He buried again neatly and padded home. When he returned, the wolf asked where he'd been. "Oh," said the fox, brushing frost from his fur, "I was invited to a christening by the meadow folk. It was a lovely gathering, very festive." The wolf didn't question it. Christmas was full of odd traditions and invitations. The second morning, again, the fox crept out, while the forest still slept under its white blanket. This time, he ate half of what remained, too good to resist on a cold morning. When he came home, the wolf asked, "Another christening?" "Oh, yes," said the fox, shaking snowflakes from his ears. "The baby was given an unusual name, half and half. Strange, but who am I to judge?" The wolf nodded, puzzled by the name, but trusting as ever. In the third morning, by now, the fox dreamed of that last bit of butter all night long. He hurried to the shoreline, dug up the keg, and finished the lot. Then he cleaned inside with his paw until it gleamed. When the wolf asked how the christening was this time, the fox smiled smugly. "Oh, delightful. The baby's name was Lick It Clean. Very modern." The wolf's brow wrinkled. Lick It Clean. What an odd name for a child. The fox just shrugged, as if December always brought strange stories. On the fourth morning, the fox said, "Shall we fetch our butter today? I was thinking of having it with warm bread. Christmas breakfast, you know." The wolf's tail wagged. "Yes, let's get it." They walked through the crisp morning, snow crunching under their paws. Candlelight still glowed in the faraway cottage windows. The air smelled faintly of pine and chimney smoke. The wolf dug eagerly, and then gasped. The keg was empty, completely empty. "Well, you must have come here without me," the fox said, widening his eyes in mock horror. "What? I didn't," cried the wolf. "Well, I've been home every moment." But the fox was already circling him, sniffing dramatically. "Well," he said gravely, "someone ate the butter. And I notice you've been licking your lips an awful lot lately." "That's because it's freezing," the wolf protested. Said the fox. "Hold still, let me check properly." The wolf, gentle-hearted, soft and trusting, stood perfectly still. The fox leaned close as if examining him, then slyly brushed a little smear of butter onto the wolf's mouth from what he'd saved on the fur of his paw. "There," the fox announced triumphantly. "Butter on your muzzle. I knew it. You didn't wait for Christmas morning at all." The wolf touched his mouth, horrified. I swear I didn't eat it." But the fox just shook his head with theatrical disappointment. "Next time," he said, "we stick to my idea of portioning things properly." Every Christmas season has one fox, the one who sneaks the mince pies, drains the Baileys or empties the butter dish, and then somehow manages to blame the most honest person in the room. So keep an eye on the charming, clever ones who insist they're doing everything fairly. They might just be warming themselves on your winter treats. When the heathen raged through the forests of the ancient Northland, there grew a giant tree, branching with huge limbs toward the clouds. It was the thunder oak of the war god Thor. Thither, under cover of night, heathen priests were wont to bring their victims, both men and beasts, and slay them upon the altar of the thunder god. There, in the darkness, was wrought many an evil deed, while human blood was poured forth and watered the roots of that gloomy tree, from whose branches depended the mistletoe, the faithful plant that sprang from the blood-fed veins of the oak. So gloomy and terror-ridden was the spot on which grew the tree that no beasts of field or forest would lodge beneath its dark branches. Nor birds would nest or perch among its gnarled limbs. Long, long ago, on a white Christmas Eve, Thor's priests held their winter rites beneath the thunder oak. Through the deep snow of the dense forest hastened throngs of heathen folk, all intent on keeping the mystic feast of the mighty Thor. In the hush of the night, the folk gathered in the glade, where stood the tree. Closely they pressed around the great altar stone under the overhanging boughs, where stood the white-robed priests. Clearly shone the moonlight on all. Then from the altar flashed upward the sacrificial flames, casting their lurid glow on the straining faces of the human victims, awaiting the blow of the priest's knife. But the knife never fell, for from the silent avenues of the dark forest came the good Saint Winfrid and his people. Swiftly the saint drew from his girdle a shining axe. Fiercely he smote the thunder oak, hewing a deep gash in its trunk. And while the heathen folk gazed in horror and wonder, the bright blade of the axe circled faster and faster around St. Winfrid's head, and the flakes of wood flew far and wide from the deepening cut in the body of the tree. Suddenly, there was heard overhead the sound of a mighty, rushing wind. A whirling blast struck the tree. It gripped the oak from its foundations. Backward it fell like a tower, groaning as it split into 4 pieces. But just behind it, unharmed by the ruin, stood a young fir tree, pointing its green spire to heaven. St. Winfrid dropped his axe, turned to speak to the people. Joyously his voice rang out through the crisp winter air. This little tree, a young child of the forest, shall be your holy tree tonight. It is the tree of peace, for your houses are built of fir. It is the sign of endless life, for its leaves are forever green. See how it points upward to heaven. Let this be called the tree of the Christ child. Gather about it, not in the wildwood, but in your homes. There it will shelter no deeds of blood, but loving gifts and rites of kindness. So shall the peace of the white Christ reign in your hearts. And with songs of joy the multitude of heathen folk took up the little fir tree and bore it to the house of their chief. And there, with goodwill and peace, they kept the holy Christmas tide. Most terribly cold it was. It snowed, and was nearly quite dark. And evening, the last evening of the year. In this cold and darkness, there went along the street a poor little girl, bareheaded and with naked feet. When she left home, she had slippers on, it is true, but what was the good of that? They were very large slippers, which her mother had hitherto worn. So large were they, and the poor little thing lost them as she scuffled away across the street. Because of 2 carriages that rolled by dreadfully fast. One slipper was nowhere to be found. The other had been laid hold of by an urchin, and off he ran with it. He thought it would do capitally for a cradle when he some day or other should have children himself. So the little maiden walked on with her tiny naked feet that were quite red and blue from the cold. She carried a quantity of matches in an old apron, and she held a bundle of them in her hand. Nobody had bought anything of her the whole livelong day. No one had given her a single farthing. She crept along, trembling with cold and hunger, a very picture of sorrow, the poor little thing. The flakes of snow covered her long, fair hair, which fell in beautiful curls around her neck. But of that, of course, she never once now thought. From all the windows the candles were gleaming, and it smelt so deliciously of roast goose. For you know it was New Year's Eve. Yes, of that she thought. In a corner, formed by two houses, of which one advanced more than the other, she seated herself down and cowered together. Her little feet she had drawn close up to her, but she grew colder and colder, and to go home she did not venture, for she had not sold any matches, and could not bring a farthing of money. From her father she would certainly get blows, and at home it was cold too, for above her she had only the roof, through which the wind whistled, even though the largest cracks were stopped up with straw and rags. Her little hands were almost numbed with cold. Oh, a match might afford her a world of comfort, if only she dared take a single one out of the bundle, draw it against the wall, and warm her fingers by it. She drew one out. Wrisht! How it blazed! How it burnt! It was a warm, bright flame like a candle. As she held her hands over it, it was a wonderful light. It seemed really to light the little maiden, as though she were sitting before a large iron stove, with burnished brass feet and a brass ornament at the top. The fire burned with such blessed influence. It warmed so delightfully. The little girl had already stretched out her feet to warm them too. But the small flame went out. The stove vanished. She had only the remains of the burnt-out match in her hand. She rubbed another against the wall. It burned brightly, and where the light fell on the wall, there the wall became transparent like a veil, so that she could see into the room. On the table was a spread of snow-white tablecloth. Upon it was a splendid porcelain service, and the roast goose was steaming famously with its stuffing of apple and dried plums. And what was still more capital to behold was the goose hopped down from the dish, reeled about on the floor with knife and fork in its breast, till it came up to the poor little girl. When the match went out, and nothing but the thick, cold, damp wall was left behind. She lighted another match. Now, there she was sitting under the most magnificent Christmas tree. It was still larger and more decorated than the one which she had seen through the glass door in the rich merchant's house. Thousands of lights were burning on the green branches, and gaily colored pictures, such as she had seen in the shop windows, looked down upon her. The little maiden stretched out her hands towards them when the match went out. The lights of the Christmas tree rose higher and higher. She saw them now as stars in heaven. One fell down and formed a long trail of fire. "Someone is just dead," said the little girl. For her old grandmother, the only person who had ever loved her, and was now no more, had told her that when a star falls, a soul ascends to God. She drew another match against the wall. It was again light, and in the lustre there stood the old grandmother, so bright and radiant, so mild, and with such an expression of love. "Grandmother," cried the little one, "oh, take me with you. You go away when the match burns out. You vanish like the warm stove, like the delicious roast goose and the magnificent Christmas tree." And she rubbed the whole bundle of matches quickly against the wall, for she wanted to be quite sure of keeping her grandmother near her. And the matches gave such a brilliant light that it was brighter than at noonday. Never formerly had the grandmother been so beautiful and so tall. She took the little maiden on her arm, and both flew in brightness and in joy, so high, so very high. And then, above, was neither cold, nor hunger, nor anxiety. They were with God. But in the corner, at the cold hour of dawn, sat the poor girl, with rosy cheeks, with a smiling mouth, leaning against the wall, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. Stiff and stark sat the child there with her matches, of which one bundle had been burnt. She wanted to warm herself, people said. No one had the slightest suspicion of what beautiful things she had seen. No one even dreamed of the splendor in which, with her grandmother, she had entered on the joys of a new year. There was once, on a time, a little girl whose father and mother were dead, and she was so poor that she no longer had any little room to live in, or bed to sleep in, and at last she had nothing else but the clothes she was wearing, and a little bit of bread in her hand, which some charitable soul had given her. She was, however, good and pious. And as she was thus forsaken by all the world, she went forth into the open country, trusting in the good God. Then a poor man met her, who said, "Ah, give me something to eat. I am so hungry." She reached into her pocket and gave him a whole piece of bread, and said, "May God bless it to thy use," and went onwards. Then came a child who moaned and said, "My head is so cold. Give me something to cover it with." So she took off her hood and gave it to him. And when she walked a little further, she met another child who had no jacket and was frozen with cold. Then she gave it her own. And a little farther on, one begged for a frock, and she gave away that also. At length, she got into a forest, and it had already become dark. And there came yet another child, and asked for a little shirt. And the good little girl thought to herself, "It is a dark night, and no one sees thee. Thou canst very well give thy little shirt away," and took it off, and gave away that also. And as she so stood, and had not one single thing left, suddenly some stars from heaven fell down, and they were nothing else but hard, smooth pieces of money. And although she had just given her little shirt away, she had a new one, which was of the very finest linen. Then she gathered together the money into this, and was rich all the days of her life. A great many years ago, in a land far, far away from us, there was a certain king who was dearly beloved by all of his people. Men admired him because he was strong and he was just. In all of his dealings, they knew they could depend on him. Every matter that came to his consideration was carefully weighed in his mind, and his decisions were always wise. Women trusted him because he was pure and true, with lofty thoughts and high ambitions. And the children loved him because of his gentleness and tenderness towards them. He was never so burdened with affairs of state that he could not stop to speak a pleasant word of greeting to the tiniest child. And the very poorest of his subjects knew they could count upon his interest in them. This deep-seated love and reverence for their king made the people of this country wish very much for a way in which to give expression to it so that he would understand it. Many consultations were held, and one after another the plans suggested were rejected. But at last, a most happy solution was found. was rapidly circulated here and there, and it met with the most hearty approval everywhere. It was a plan for celebrating the king's birthday. Now, of course, that had been done many times before in many lands, but there were certain features about this celebration which differed materially from anything that had ever been tried. They decided that on the king's birthday, the people shall all bring him gifts, but they wanted in some way to let him know that these gifts were the expression of a love on the part of the giver, which was pure and true and unselfish. And in order to show that, it was decided that each gift should be a white gift. The king heard about this beautiful plan, and it touched his heart in a wonderful way. He decided that he would do his part to carry out the idea and let his loving subjects know how much he appreciated their thoughtfulness. You can just imagine the excitement there was all over the land as the king's birthday drew near. All sorts of loving sacrifices had been made, and everyone was anxious to make his gift the very best he had to offer. At last, the day dawned, and eagerly the people came dressed in white and carrying their white gifts. To their surprise, they were ushered into a great big room, the largest one in the palace. They stood in silence when they first entered it, for it was beautiful beyond all expression. It was a white room. The floor was white marble. The ceiling looked like a mass of soft, white fluffy clouds. The walls were hung with beautiful white silken draperies, and all the furnishings were white. In one end of the room stood a stately white throne, and seated upon it was their beloved ruler, and he was clad in shining white robes, and his attendants, all dressed in white, were grouped around him. Then came the presentation of the gifts. What a wealth of them there was, and how different they were in value. In those days, it was just as it is now. There were many people who had great wealth, and they brought gifts which were generous in proportion to their wealth. One brought a handful of pearls, another a number of carved ivories. There were beautiful laces and silks and embroideries, all in pure white. But many of the people were poor. Some of them were very poor, and their gifts were quite different from those I have been telling about. Some of the women brought handfuls of white rice. Some of the boys brought their favorite white pigeons. And one dear little girl smilingly gave him a pure white rose. It was wonderful to watch the king as each one came and kneeled before him as he presented his gift. He never seemed to notice whether the gift was great or small. He regarded not one gift above another so long as all were white. Never had the king been so happy as he was that day, and never had such real joy filled the hearts of the people. They decided to use the same plan every year. And so it came to pass that year after year, on the king's birthday, the people came from here and there and everywhere and brought their white gifts. The gifts which showed that their love was pure, their love was strong, their love was true, and their love was without stain. And year after year the king sat in his white robes and his white throne in the great white room, and it was always the same. Always he regarded not one gift above another, so long as they were all white. If you want to write to Santa Claus, write to him, said Mrs. Sebastian. There's a writing pad and pencil in the drawer. I will then, said Petey Billy. All I want is a horse. Annie, his sister, who was 12, sniggered, putting on her coat and scarf. Oh, leave the boy alone, said Mrs. Sebastian, quite severely. Annie, still laughing, went outside among the first stars and snowflakes. Billy, aged 8, sat under the paraffin lamp, and it took him as long to compose the Christmas letter as it might have taken the gravestone maker to cut an inscription. His mother mixed the Christmas pudding. The little croft among the Orkney hills, brimmed with spices and fruits of the Orient. Dear Santa, wrote Billy, please can I get a horse for Christmas? Just leave it at the end of the house, as I know it won't be easy for you to put a horse in my stocking. I like horses more than anything. Just a horse will do. Never mind fruit or sweeties. Yours, William Sebastian, Jr. His mother had made a very rich sphere of the pudding, and was about to wrap it in its clute. The biggest pot in the house was chuckling on top of the stove. Won't you read the letter to me? Said Mrs. Sebastian, now that Billy had laid aside the blunt pencil, torn the script out of the pad. Oh no, said Petey Billy. Letters is private. Meantime, Annie had come in from the first snowfall, and her eyes were 2 glittering stars, and her cheeks were 2 apples, and she was a galaxy of snow crystals from head to feet. Petey Billy put his letter to Santa into the fire, and a flame licked it up in an instant. What way on earth, said Annie, is Santa going to read a burnt letter? Oh, don't torment the boy, said his mother. Time for your homework. It doesn't matter anyway, said Annie, because there's no such person as Santa. Petey Billy gave his sister a look of wonderment and pity. Then he stood in the open door for a while, looking at the dark hills where he would ride his horse on summer days. Then he yawned and mumbled, "Good night," to his mother and sister and went to bed. Sleep bore him off with slow, sifting mane and gentle hoofbeats. The pudding sang happy songs and thumped in the black pot. There had never been a Christmas morning quite like it in the croft. Peety Billy had rushed out at first light to welcome his horse, and the field was empty. Nor was there a sign of a horse in byre and barn, or anywhere about the steading. He came indoors, downcast. His sister Annie was in her nightgown, turning the pages of a new book with illustrations called Little Women. Annie was very pleased with her Christmas present. As she turned the pages, she chomped on her Christmas apple and peeled bits of Spanish sunshine from her Christmas orange. Peety Billy's stocking was loaded too. He pulled out an apple, an orange, and a wooden horse painted bright red with black spots, and it stood on a kind of a platform with a wooden wheel at each corner. Mrs. Sebastian came in from milking the cow upon a disgraceful scene. Peety Billy had thrown the toy horse against the wall with such force that the wheels had come off, and the head was bashed in. Annie sat in the rocking chair laughing. Peety Billy, in a passion of tears, threw first his apple and then his orange at his sister. "Oh, what a way to carry on!" cried Mrs. Sebastian. "And on Christmas morning of all days." The rest of the day, however, was happy enough. Neighbours dropped by, and one of them, the blacksmith, gave Peety Billy a shilling. "A horse," said the blacksmith, when he had drunk his glass of old Orkney. "You'll never want for a horse, boy. I can tell you a good horseman when I see one. You have the very hands of a ploughman, Billy. You'll be a famous horseman someday. You will, laddie." Three neighbour women came in and kissed him under the mistletoe, one after the other, amid a storm of laughter, and they gave him 6pence each. Soon it was dinner time. Peety Billy enjoyed the goose and tatties, and he ate so much of the pudding that he thought for a while that he would burst. The ginger wine glowed on his tongue with all the magic fires of winter. Annie said not a word all day. She sat curled in the rocking chair, reading Little Women. She was still reading it when her mother lit the lamp in the middle of the afternoon. Peety Billy wandered outside in the first dark. Maybe Santa was late with his horse. Maybe it would be waiting at the end of the steading for him, cold, wanting a mouthful of hay. But there was still no horse under the stars. The night before Hogmanay, the boy sat down writing a letter at the table. Annie was making a rag doll for the poor blind child in the croft house beside the loch. She could be a kind enough girl to people outside of the family. The mother was mixing shortbread in an immense bowl beside the fire. The whole parish, even the WRI woman, said Mrs. Sebastian was the best woman for shortbread they knew. There wouldn't be much of her shortbread left by the 6th of January. Beady Billy finished the letter and addressed it and put it in the stove and ran outside under the freezing stars. The letter, half scorched, fell through the ribs of the stove and smouldered on the stone floor. Annie fell on it like a gull on a crust of bread. It was addressed to Mr. S. Claus. Dear Sir, Annie read aloud. The horse I got for Christmas was not the kind of horse I was thinking about when I wrote to you. I hope you forgive me for the way I treated the wooden horse. Andrew Stout, the joiner, has mended it. Thank you. For same. Sam, the blacksmith, says it takes a long while for a good horse and a good horseman to meet up with each other, so I'll be patient. I'm sorry for calling you an old cheat and a twister on Christmas morning, but I was really mad. Yours faithfully, William Sebastian Jr. Annie could hardly get the last words out. Rolling about among the rags and scissors and spools of thread, shrieking with mirth. I would not have you forget that I am speaking about an incident in the childhood of the most famous horseman in his day, in Orkney, Shetland, and Caithness, William Sebastian Thorstone. He won every ploughing match between the ages of 18 and 40. No man, it was said, drove a purer furrow. Wherever in the northeast there was a sick horse or an intractable horse, William Sebastian was sent for. There was a healing in his look, and in his words, and in his hands. His own horses were splendid animals. There they stood, heraldic against the sunset, or sniffing a storm out in the Atlantic. They tossed their manes, and the thunder of their hoofs echoed from the laird's hole to the fisherman's bothy. The sideboard up at the Thornstone farm was crowded with silver trophies. Visitors who came to call on the elderly master of horses thought it strange to see, among the engraved silver pieces, a toy wooden horse with rickety wheels and only one eye. It said the old man died on the day the first tractor was unloaded from the Aberdeen boat onto the pier at Kirkwall. Once upon a time, there was a lonely old man who lived in a little cottage in the woods. There the old man sat alone as the sun was slowly setting and darkness engulfed his little abode among the trees. Many a long evening was spent in this manner, alone in the dark, because the old man did not know how to make the light that existed in daytime stay with him in his cottage come evening. Summers are all right, the old man said to himself. It's those winters I can very happily live without. I simply cannot abide the dark and the cold winter. The old man liked daytime, even if it didn't bring a great deal of light in winter, and he endeavored to use the daylight hours as best he could. He brewed coffee at regular intervals and took a sip from his cup every now and then whilst reading the morning papers. Washing up was swiftly taken care of, and if the weather wasn't too cruel, he might even venture out for a walk, wearing his snow boots, his fur hat pulled down tightly around his ears, and a pair of thick woolen mittens, keeping his hands warm. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Spring and then summer returned, but no matter how the old man tried to hold on to the delightful light of summer, autumn too returned, followed by winter. Oh, poor me, the old man lamented. Now I am stuck here again without light. Is there no end to this misery? It's dark and silent and lonely. All winter I am so fed up with this. Next day, the sun was shining from a bright blue sky, and the snow surrounding the cottage was positively glistening in the sunshine. The trees all beautifully frost-clad. The old man donned his boots and went outside again all wrapped up. Just as he entered the woods on the frozen path, he had an idea. A lamp. What if he had a lamp in his tiny cottage? Maybe then the light that ran away earlier and earlier in the evenings would stay a little longer. The old man pondered and wondered in the chilly morning light, while the snow crunched and creaked under his boots. When it was time to go for a walk, the old man brought a small axe and a small saw with him. He picked and chose among the trees until he was sure he'd found the right one. The very one that would help him persuade the light to stay with him, even in the winter. The following week, the old man was, if possible, even more grouchy, grumpy, and disappointed as soon as the daylight left the cottage. He needed as much of it as possible to finish his work before the upcoming festivities. But despite pulling back all the curtains and even opening the windows, light kept leaving when it had enough of daytime. It's Christmas soon, the the old man said, "and I'll never get them ready in time." Making a supreme effort, he sawed and hammered, glued, polished, and painted. On the 23rd of December, just as night planned to swallow day, there they were, ready. 5 lamps placed neatly on the table, awaiting the light. Now, the old man thought, now finally I'll be able to see in the evenings. I'll be able to sit and enjoy the light all Christmas and all winter. The old man waited and waited, but nothing happened. The lamps remained unlit, and the kitchen got darker and darker and darker. Dejected, the old man sat down at the kitchen table, tears in his eyes. He could not understand what he'd done wrong. He'd carried out all the work from beginning to end. The lamps were in good condition and ready to embrace the light. The light that he truly wished to welcome with open arms and open eyes. Why wouldn't it come? Hours passed. It was the dead of night. The old man sat there awaiting the light as long as he could keep awake, but there was no sign of it, not even the tiniest of glimmers. The lamps refused to light up. "Is it going to be a gloomy Christmas this year?" the old man said, and finally went to bed cold and tired. When he awoke, it was broad daylight. "My goodness, have I slept that late? I can't believe I've overslept on Christmas Eve morning," the old man muttered to himself. He yawned and stretched. Then he remembered the night before, and immediately felt like curling up in bed again. The Christmas he'd been hoping for was not going to happen. "It's Christmas Eve after all. I guess I'd better get out of bed," he said grouchily, while searching for his slippers. That's when he happened to look at the clock on the bedside table, showing 5 a.m. on Christmas Eve morning. The old man practically jumped out of bed. 5 o'clock in the morning? But why is it so light in here? There, on the kitchen table, stood 5 shining lamps, made of wood, ready to light up the lonely old man's Christmas. There once lived an old man with his second wife, and they each had a daughter. The wife pampered her own daughter, who was lazy and bad-tempered. But she was unkind to her stepdaughter. The old man's daughter had to rise before daybreak to tend the cattle, fetch the firewood, light the stove, and sweep the floor. Yet her stepmother found fault with all she did, and grumbled at her the whole day through. Even the wildest wind grows calm with time. But there was no quieting this old woman once she was roused. She would not be content until she had driven the poor girl from the house. "Get rid of her, old man," she said one day to her husband. "I cannot bear the sight of her any longer. Drive her into the forest and leave her in the snow." The old man pleaded, but the wife always had her way. So, one bitterly cold morning, he harnessed his horses to the sledge and called his daughter. "Come, my child. We are going for a ride. Climb into the sledge." The sledge raced over the crisp snow into the forest until it came to a lofty fir tree. There, the old man stopped and left the luckless girl trembling by a deep snowdrift. He drove home with a heavy heart, certain he would never see his daughter again. It was very cold, and the girl sat beneath the hoary fir tree, shivering. When all of a sudden, she caught her breath, for she could hear a cracking and snapping of twigs, and she knew Grandfather Frost was leaping through the trees. In a twinkling, he was in the topmost branches of the very tree by which she sat. "Are you warm, my pretty one?" he called. "Yes, quite warm, thank you, Grandfather Frost," she answered. He came down lower, and the cracking and snapping grew louder than ever. "Are you warm?" he called again. "Are you snug, my pretty one?" The girl was scarcely able to catch her breath, but she said, "Yes, I'm quite warm, thank you, Grandfather Frost." He then climbed lower still, cracking and snapping the frosty boughs very loudly indeed. "Are you warm?" he asked. "Are you snug, my pretty one? Are you cozy, my sweet snow child?" The girl was growing numb and could hardly move her tongue, but she still managed to whisper, "I'm quite warm, thank you, Grandfather Frost." Then Grandfather Frost took pity on the girl and wrapped her in his fluffy furs. Meanwhile, the wicked stepmother was frying pancakes and preparing for the funeral repast. She said to her husband, "Go to the forest, old fool, and bring your daughter back to be buried." The old man harnessed the horses and obediently went into the forest. And there, he found his daughter on the very spot where he had left her. She was alive. She was well, wrapped in a warm sable coat over a glittering velvet gown. Beside her stood a large chest stuffed with furs and rare gems. The old man was overjoyed. He seated his daughter in the sledge, put the chest in beside her, and drove home. Back in the house, the old woman was still frying pancakes when suddenly her little dog began to bark. Ruff, ruff. The old man's daughter comes rich and fair, a wondrous fortune she found there. The old woman threw the dog a pancake and said, "You are wrong, dog. You should say the old man's daughter is cold and dead. The forest snow lies on her head." The dog munched the pancake, but still barked, "Ruff, ruff. The old man's daughter comes rich and fair. A wondrous fortune found she there." The old woman hurled more pancakes at the dog, and when this did not stop it, she beat it until it ran howling into the snow. Suddenly, there came the sound of the sledge racing into the yard. The door burst open, and in walked the old man's daughter, dazzling in her white furs and precious stones. Behind her walked her happy father, bearing the heavy chest of furs and jewels. The old woman was astonished to see her alive and dressed in such finery. "Harness the horses, old man," she said to her husband. "Take my own daughter to the forest and leave her at the same spot." The old man put the woman's daughter into the sledge, drove her into the forest, and left her by the deep snowdrift under the lofty fir tree. She was soon so cold, her teeth chattered, and her feet grew numb. Presently, Grandfather Frost came leaping through the treetops, cracking and snapping the twigs, and stopped to ask the old woman's daughter, Are you warm, my pretty one? Oh no, I'm terribly cold, she snapped. Don't pinch and pierce me so. Grandfather Frost came lower, making the branches snap and crack more loudly. Are you warm? He called. Are you snug, my pretty one? Oh no, I'm freezing, she snapped back. Go away, you stupid old man. But Grandfather Frost came down still lower, and the branches cracked and snapped louder than ever, and his breath grew colder and colder. Are you warm? He called again. Are you snug, my pretty one? Are you cozy, my sweet one? Oh, no, she cried. I'm frozen stiff. Go away, you stupid gray beard. Grandfather Frost was so cross that he sent a piercing cold blast through her and turned the old woman's daughter into a block of ice. Day had barely dawned when the old woman said to her husband, "Make haste and harness the horses, old man. Go and fetch my daughter and bring her back, clad in furs and jewels." When the old man had gone, the little dog began to bark. Ruff, ruff. The old man's daughter will soon be wed, but the old woman's daughter is cold and dead. The old woman threw the dog a pie and said, "You are wrong, dog. You should say, the old woman's daughter comes rich and fair. A wondrous fortune found she there." The dog continued its barking. Ruff, ruff. The old woman's daughter is cold and dead. Before long, she heard the sound of horses' hoofs and rushed out to greet her daughter. But when the old woman turned back the cover on the sledge, she found her daughter frozen stiff. So overcome with grief was she that she died. The old man and his daughter lived on together happily for many, many years, well rid of the cruel old woman and her very lazy daughter. In 1875, Mark Twain wrote a letter to his daughter Susie, who was 3 years old at the time, which he signed, "Your loving Santa Claus." I'm going to read this letter in its entirety, but first a little bit of pretext. Twain was very close to his daughter, all the way up to her untimely death at the age of 24 in 1896. And that year, she had written her first letter to Santa Claus. Twain, being a writer, couldn't stand for his young daughter to feel like her work went unheard. So he decided to pen the following letter to "My dear Susie Clemens," from the man in the moon himself. The story has been widely shared since in anthologies as a cute reminder of the spirit of Christmas and the love of parents for their children, who, year after year, don bright red suits and leave out milk and cookies to help keep the magic alive. So here it is, a letter from Santa Claus by Mark Twain. My dear Susie Clemens, I have received and read all the letters which you and your little sister have written me. I can read your and your baby sister's jagged and fantastic marks without any trouble at all. But I had trouble with those letters which you dictated through your mother and the nurses, for I am a foreigner and cannot read English writing well. You will find that I made no mistakes about the things which you and the baby ordered in your own letters. I went down your chimney at midnight when you were asleep and delivered them all myself, and kissed both of you too. But there were 1 or 2 small orders which I could not fill because we ran out of stock. There was a word or two in your mamma's letter which I took to be a trunk full of doll's clothes. Is that it? I will call at your kitchen door about 9 o'clock this morning to inquire. But I must not see anybody, and I must not speak to anybody but you. When the kitchen doorbell rings, George must be blindfolded and sent to the door. You must tell George he must walk on tiptoe and not speak, otherwise he will die someday. Then you must go up to the nursery and stand on a chair or the nurse's bed and put your ear to the speaking tube that leads down to the kitchen. And when I whistle through it, you must speak in the tube and say, "Welcome, Santa Claus." Then I will ask whether it was a trunk you ordered or not. If you say it was, I shall ask you what color you want the trunk to be. And then you must tell me every single thing in detail which you want the trunk to contain. Then when I say goodbye and a merry little Christmas to my little Susie Clemens, you must say, "Goodbye, good old Santa Claus. I thank you very much." Then you must go down into the library and make George close all the doors that open into the main hall. And everybody must keep still for a little while. I will go to the moon and get those things, and in a few minutes I will come down the chimney that belongs to the fireplace that is in the hall. If it is a trunk you want, because I couldn't get such a thing as a trunk down the nursery chimney, you know. If I should leave any snow in the hall, you must tell George to sweep it into the fireplace, for I haven't time to do such things. George must not use a broom, but a rag, else he will die someday. If my boot should leave a stain on the marble, George must not holy stone it away. Leave it there always in memory of my visit, and whenever you look at it or show it to anyone, you must let it remind you to be a good little girl. Whenever you are naughty, and someone points to that mark which your good old Santa Claus boots made on the marble, what will you say, little sweetheart? Goodbye for a few minutes, till I come down to the world and ring the kitchen doorbell. Your loving Santa Claus, whom people sometimes call the Man on the Moon. While many of us associate Christmas with Santa Claus, presents and cookies, the world's winter celebrations are far stranger and more wonderful than most people realize. From pooping logs to prophetic footwear, demonic door knockers to wine-drinking witches, humans have developed some truly bizarre ways to brighten up the darkest time of year. These aren't just oddities, they're windows into how different cultures have added their own special brand of weirdness to the holiday season. Some traditions emerged from ancient beliefs, others from historical necessity, and few seem to have sprung from pure imagination. What they all share is the universal human desire to make winter's darkest days a little more magical, even if some of that magic takes surprisingly strange forms. So, grab your roller skates if you're heading to Christmas Mass in Venezuela. Hide your brooms if you're worried about Norwegian witches. And maybe pack a nose plug if you're joining a Greenland feast. We're about to explore the world's weirdest winter celebrations. Krampus, the anti-Santa we never knew we needed. While American children worry about getting coal in their stockings, Alpine kids have long known about a much more interesting deterrent to bad behavior. Krampus, Saint Nicholas's bizarre companion, who looks like what would happen if you asked a medieval artist to draw Santa's opposite twin. This peculiar figure is essentially a horned, fur-covered creature who serves as St. Nicholas's quality control department. While the saint handles the nice list with gifts and treats, Krampus deals with the naughty list in his own unique way. He carries rusty chains and he shakes dramatically, subtle he is not, along with bells to announce his arrival and a bunch of bird branches for swatting mischievous children. Most notably, he carries a large basket or sack on his back, not for delivering presents, but for carrying away particularly troublesome children. What makes Krampus especially fascinating is how he's maintained his position as Christmas's favorite oddball for centuries. Unlike other forgotten Christmas spirits, Krampus has not only survived, but thrived, becoming a beloved part of Alpine Christmas traditions. He appears on greeting cards, stars and holiday markets, and has his own feast on December 5th, Krampus Night. The tradition is so culturally significant that the Austrian government once tried to ban it in the 1930s for being too, well, Krampus-like. But you can't keep a good Christmas demon down, and he came bouncing back stronger than ever. Today, he's even gained international fame, with Krampus celebrations popping up around the world, proving that sometimes the weird things in life are the ones most worth keeping. Grýla and the Yule Cat, Iceland's peculiar problem solvers. Iceland doesn't just have one weird winter creature. They have an entire family of them. Meet Grýla, a giant troll who lives in the mountains with her lazy husband and their oversized pet cat. Think of them as Iceland's answer to the question, how do we get kids to behave and finish their winter chores? Except instead of using timeouts or groundings, they went straight to, let's invent some colorful monsters. Grýla, a fashion-forward troll who accessorizes with multiple tails and a sack for carrying away naughty children, has what you might call an unusual parenting style. She can smell misbehaving children and has an infinite appetite for them, preferably served in a stew. Yet, somehow, she ended up raising 13 sons, the Yule lads, who turned out to be more interested in stealing leftovers and licking spoons than following their mother's child-catching career path. But it's their pet, the Yule cat, who really takes the cake for weird motivation tactics. This enormous feline prowls around during Christmas, looking for people who haven't received new clothes. That's right. This is a giant cat who's really passionate about fashion. The tradition supposedly began as a way to ensure that everyone finished processing wool before the winter holidays. The deal was simple. Finish your work, get new clothes, avoid being eaten by a giant cat. As workplace incentive programs go, it was certainly effective. The Greek Kali-Kanseroi might be the most wonderfully inefficient, evil creatures in Christmas folklore. These malevolent goblins spend the entire year sawing at the world tree that supports the earth. But they're forced to emerge during the 12 days of Christmas, when the tree magically heals itself. It's like a cosmic game of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, and they never quite figure it out. During their annual vacation from unsuccessful world destruction, these goblins cause chaos in surprisingly domestic ways. They ride on people's backs, extinguish fires, and have an unusual fixation with spoiling Christmas treats. Their greatest weakness? They can only count to 2, and they're easily distracted by counting tasks. People would hang colanders outside their homes because the goblins would feel compelled to count all the holes, but would have to start over every time they reached 3. Basically, turning these supposedly terrifying creatures into the equivalent of easily distracted toddlers. Protection methods against these peculiar pests included keeping fires burning, marking doors with black crosses, and, most bizarrely, hanging tangled flax which they would attempt to count until sunrise. They're basically the only Christmas monsters you can defeat with basic arithmetic. The Christmas Brownie. The Orkney Islands Fussy House Spirit. In the Orkney Islands, the Christmas Brownie makes your most peculiar house guest look easygoing by comparison. While regular brownies, house spirits, help with chores year-round, the Christmas Brownie is like their more intense cousin who visits during the holidays and has very strong opinions about how everything should be done. The seasonal spirit emerges only during the 12 days of Christmas, and it's significantly larger and more demanding than your everyday brownie. Think of it as the holiday equivalent of having a very peculiar supernatural health inspector drop by. The Christmas Brownie checks your housekeeping standards with all the intensity of a drill sergeant conducting a white glove inspection. The good news is that a well-treated Christmas Brownie might help with winter farm work or household chores. The bad news? If you don't meet its exacting standards, or forget its traditional offerings of bannocks and cream, it might express disappointment by rearranging your furniture, terrorizing your livestock, or creating the medieval equivalent of a one-star review for your housekeeping skills. It's essentially the original holiday stress inducer, as if preparing for family visits wasn't pressure enough. Imagine knowing a perfectionist spirit who will be judging your cleaning abilities too. The world's weirdest gift givers. If you think Santa Claus sliding down chimneys is odd, wait until you meet some of these alternative holiday present deliverers. From a pooping log to a wine-drinking witch, these gift givers prove that creativity knows no bounds when it comes to spreading holiday cheer. Caga Tio, the log that poops presents. In the running for most unlikely gift giver ever, Catalonia's Caga Tio, literally meaning the pooping log, proves that sometimes the strangest ideas make the best traditions. Picture this: a hollow log with stick legs, wearing a bright red Catalan hat, sporting a cheerful painted face, and waiting to literally poop out your Christmas presents. It's like someone took a rejected Pinocchio character and turned it into a beloved holiday tradition. The magic begins in early December, when families adopt their Tio. Children are tasked with feeding it daily with fruit, nuts, and sweets, carefully covering it with a blanket each night to keep it warm. This isn't just about being nice. It's a strategic investment in their future presence. The better fed Tio is, the more generous its gift giving might be. Come Christmas Eve, things get even weirder. Children gather around their well-fed log and begin beating it with sticks while singing traditional songs. These songs aren't your typical carols. They're more like negotiation tactics set to music, with lyrics that alternate between promising treats and threatening to throw the log in the fire if it doesn't produce good presents. After the song and the beating, children look under the blanket to find their rewards. Modern parents often add sound effects for extra authenticity, making this possibly the only Christmas tradition where adults making farting noises is not only acceptable, but expected. La Befana, Italy's multitasking winter witch. While Santa gets cookies and milk, Italy's La Befana expects a glass of wine at each house she visits. This wine-loving witch proves that you're never too old to reinvent yourself. She started as a possible remnant of an ancient Roman goddess and ended up as Christmas's most efficient gift giver. According to legend, the three wise men stopped at Befana's house asking for directions to find baby Jesus. They invited her to join them, but she declined, saying she was too busy cleaning. Talk about missing a historic opportunity. Later, regretting her decision, she set out to find them, and now spends every January 5th delivering gifts to children in an eternal search for the Christ child. What makes Befana particularly impressive is her commitment to multitasking. Not only does she deliver presents, but she sweeps the floor of each house she visits, symbolically sweeping away the problems of the old year. She enters through keyholes rather than chimneys, much more practical. She rides a broomstick, environmentally friendly, and wears dark, soot-covered clothes. She's essentially combined the roles of Santa Claus, house cleaner, and New Year's life coach into one efficient package. Mari Lwyd, Wales's poetic horse skull. If you think modern carol singers can be persistent, meet Mari Lwyd, a horse skull mounted on a pole, decorated with ribbons and bells, carried by someone hidden under a white sheet, who won't leave your door until you've outrhymed it. This might be the only Christmas tradition where your gift-receiving success depends on your ability to engage in a battle of wits with a decorated horse skull. The Mari Lwyd party arrives at houses during the Christmas season, beginning a verbal battle conducted entirely in verse. The skull's carriers sing requests for entry, while those inside must respond with increasingly creative verses refusing them. This continues until one side runs out of rhymes, or the homeowners finally relent and invite the group inside for food and drinks. Think of it as Christmas caroling meets freestyle rap battle. battles, but with a horse skull as the MC. The tradition combines several unlikely elements: the preserved skull of a horse, improvisational poetry, and the promise of holiday snacks and drinks. It's probably the only Christmas tradition where you might hear someone say, "Sorry, we can't come to dinner tonight. We're having a rap battle with a horse skull." Strange rituals and superstitions. Just when you thought holiday traditions couldn't get any weirder, here come the nude sauna spirits, broom-stealing witches, talking farm animals, and matchmaking footwear. These peculiar customs prove that when it comes to winter traditions and celebrations, sometimes the stranger, the better. Finnish sauna elves. The nude spirit party crashers. In Finland, where saunas are taken very seriously, even Christmas spirits need a good steam. The sauna elf adds an unusual twist to holiday spa days. You need to clear out of the sauna before midnight on Christmas Eve. Or you might interrupt their supernatural spa session. These particular elves take their sauna time very seriously. According to tradition, they're nude, as proper sauna etiquette demands, but otherwise look like typical elves, with long beards and pointed features. The main difference is that they're incredibly territorial about their Christmas Eve sauna rites. If you overstay your welcome, you might find yourself sharing a steam with some very irritated naked elf spirits. Modern Finnish families still respect this tradition, making sure to finish their Christmas Eve saunas well before midnight. It's probably the only holiday custom where "don't interrupt the naked elf spa time" is considered sensible family advice. Some people even leave a little water and fresh birch branches for the spirits, because apparently even supernatural beings appreciate good sauna accessories. Norwegian Christmas witches, the Great Broom Heist. Norway Norway's peculiar Christmas Eve tradition of hiding brooms might seem like an early spring cleaning avoidance tactic, but there's a wonderfully weird reason behind it. According to tradition, Christmas Eve is prime time for witches and evil spirits to steal your cleaning equipment for their midnight joyrides. This has led to one of the more practical holiday security measures: broom hiding. Families tuck away all their sweeping implements in the most secure spots in the house. Some particularly enthusiastic defenders of their cleaning equipment even go as far as firing shotguns into the air to scare away these cleaning supply stealing supernatural beings. Just picture it. Christmas Eve in Norway, and instead of just worrying about tracking Santa on radar, people are conducting broom inventory checks and possibly maintaining anti-witch artillery positions. It's probably the only Christmas tradition where home defense and housekeeping supplies intersect. Some families still hide their brooms today, though mostly for tradition's sake, and possibly because it's a great excuse to avoid cleaning during the holidays. The talking animals of Poland. Midnight conversations. Polish tradition holds that any animal can speak in human voices at midnight on Christmas Eve. But there's a catch. Trying to eavesdrop on their conversations might not end well. It's like a cosmic game of gossip with farm animals, but potentially with lethal consequences. This tradition springs from the belief that animals present at Christ's birth were given the gift of human speech. To honor this, Polish families share a special Christmas wafer with their livestock before the holiday feast. This is partly out of respect for the animal's holy connection, and partly, one suspects, to butter them up in the hopes they'll say nice things about their owners during the midnight chat. However, folklore warns that humans shouldn't try to listen in on these conversations. Those who have allegedly dropped dead from shock at the animal's revelations, apparently livestock, have a lot of opinions about their living conditions and caretakers. It's probably the only Christmas tradition where don't spy on the talking animals is considered legitimate advice. A marriage predicting shoe toss. Footwear fortune telling. In the Czech Republic, single women have developed perhaps the most practical approach to holiday fortune telling. Throwing a shoe over their shoulder. It's like a Christmas version of throwing a wedding bouquet, but with footwear and more specific rules. The ritual is simple but precise. On Christmas Eve, unmarried women stand with their backs to their house's front door and throw a shoe over their shoulder. If the toe points toward the door, wedding bells will ring within the year. If it points away, another year of single life awaits. This has led to countless debates about proper shoe-throwing technique, and probably more than a few arguments about what counts as truly pointing at the door. Nobody seems to have addressed what happens if the shoe lands sideways, leading to presumed annual disputes about geometric alignment and marriage prospects. It's also unclear whether different types of shoes wield different results. Is a boot more accurate than a slipper? Does a high heel provide more precise predictions? These are the kinds of questions that keep Czech matchmakers up at night. Bizarre food and social customs. Just when you thought holiday meals couldn't get any stranger, here come fermented birds, speed-eating grapes, and a nationwide fried chicken obsession. These traditions prove that when it comes to holiday feasting, weird is definitely wonderful. Consecrated chicken bones, Greenland's fermented feast. If you think your family's holiday dinner is an acquired taste, wait until you hear about kiviak. Greenland's contribution to bizarre Christmas delicacies. Picture this. Take about 500 small seabirds, wrap them in sealskin, bury them under a rock, and let them ferment for several months. Voila! Christmas dinner is served. The preparation process is a masterclass in patience and strong stomachs. The birds are packed whole, yes, including feathers and all, into a seal skin, with all air pressed out before sealing. This makeshift fermenting bag is then buried under rocks to keep it safe from other animals who, surprisingly, aren't interested in this particular delicacy. When Christmas arrives, the package is dug up and the fermented birds are eaten straight from their sealskin wrapper. The aroma is so unique that it's considered polite to eat kiviak outside. Even hardcore fans of strong-smelling foods might raise an eyebrow at this one. Yet, in Greenland, it's a beloved traditional dish that connects modern holiday celebrations to ancient survival techniques. After all, when your ancestors figured out how to preserve food through the dark Arctic winter, you honor their innovation. Even if it means holding your nose while doing so. Christmas Melon Watch. The Great Grape Race. In Spain and parts of Latin America, New Year's Eve involves a peculiar race against time that makes speed dating look relaxed. As midnight approaches, people prepare to eat exactly 12 grapes, one with each chime of the clock. Each grape represents good luck for 1 month of the coming year. But here's the catch. You must finish all 12 before the last stroke of midnight. The tradition, known as the 12 Grapes of Luck, turns the final moments of the year into a frantic grape-eating competition. Picture elegant New Year's parties where well-dressed people are suddenly stuffing grapes into their mouths with varying degrees of dignity and success. Some strategic participants choose smaller grapes or even peel them beforehand, though purists might argue this is cheating. The real entertainment comes from watching people attempt to maintain their composure while simultaneously counting grapes, chewing fast enough, and trying not to choke before the new year begins. It's probably the only holiday tradition where, did you manage to swallow all your luck is a legitimate question. Some people even practice their grape-eating technique beforehand, making this possibly the only Christmas custom that requires athletic training. Japan's KFC frenzy, the Colonel's Christmas coup. In what might be the most successful marketing campaign in history, Japan has embraced Kentucky Fried Chicken as its official Christmas food. This tradition, born from a 1974 campaign called Kentucky for Christmas, has grown into such a phenomenon that people must order their Christmas chicken months in advance or face hour-long queues. The story goes that when foreign Christmas traditions were beginning to catch on in Japan, people noticed that Colonel Sanders' statue outside KFC restaurants, with his white beard and jolly appearance, looked somewhat Santa-like. KFC seized this marketing opportunity with the enthusiasm of a child spotting presents under the tree. They launched a holiday meal deal, and somehow this American fast food chain managed to convince an entire nation that fried chicken was the traditional Western Christmas dinner. Today, Japanese KFC outlets dress their Colonel Sanders statues in Santa suits, and their Christmas party barrels come complete with cake and champagne. The demand is so intense that December 24th sales are typically 10 times higher than regular days. Some families book their Christmas KFC order as early as October. It's probably the only place in the world where what time is our KFC reservation is a normal Christmas Eve question. The premium Christmas packages can cost upwards of $40, and people willingly wait in line for hours in the cold to collect their orders. KFC Japan even has its own Christmas theme song that plays in stores during the season. They've essentially turned fast food into a holiday institution, proving that sometimes the weirdest traditions start with a simple case of mistaken identity between Santa Claus and a fried chicken entrepreneur. Modern oddities, new traditions that make you wonder. because apparently the old weird traditions weren't enough. Humans keep inventing new and peculiar ways to celebrate the holidays. Here are some of the strangest modern additions to the Christmas canon. The Christmas Pickle Mystery. In the American Midwest, families participate in what might be the most confusing German tradition that actual Germans have never heard of. The custom involves hanging a glass pickle ornament on the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve. The first child to spot it the next morning receives an extra present or gets to open the first gift. The tradition is widely marketed as an old world German custom, but when asked, Germans typically respond with bewilderment. The most likely origin: a clever 1880s marketing campaign by Woolworths to sell more glass ornaments shaped like various fruits and vegetables. Somehow, the pickle stuck around, proving that sometimes the weirdest traditions start with a sales pitch and a healthy dose of made-up folklore. The Christmas Book Flood. Iceland's Christmas Book Flood might be the coziest modern tradition ever invented. During World War II, when import restrictions made many goods scarce in Iceland, books remained one of the few items not rationed. Paper was plentiful, and so a new holiday tradition was born. Today, Icelanders exchange books on Christmas Eve, then spend the night reading while drinking hot chocolate or alcohol-free Christmas ale. It's like someone took all the best parts of winter, books, blankets, hot drinks, and quiet evenings, and turned them into a national holiday tradition. Publishing houses release most of their new titles between September and November, creating a literal flood of books before Christmas. Spiderweb Christmas trees. In Ukraine, decorating Christmas trees with spiderweb ornaments isn't about early Halloween preparation. It's about good luck. The tradition stems from a folk tale about a poor widow who couldn't afford decorations for her family's tree. She woke on Christmas to find spiders had covered it in webs, which turned to gold and silver when the sunlight hit them. Today, Ukrainians hang shimmering web-shaped ornaments on their trees to welcome good fortune. It's probably the only Christmas tradition that makes arachnophobia fashionable and certainly the only one where the tree needs more spider webs, is a compliment rather than a commentary on housekeeping. These modern traditions prove that our appetite for weird holiday customs hasn't diminished. We're just finding new and creative ways to make the season strange. Whether it's hunting for pickles, reading through the night, or celebrating spiders, the spirit of peculiar holiday celebration lives on. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had settled our brains for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the lustre of midday to objects below. When what to my wondering eye should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys and Saint Nicholas too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur, from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. Bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly, that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside on his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew, like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night."